We were watching the Titans game together, and we were just talking. And bro, you just told me straight off the bat. He's like, Nico, Bitcoiners are not bullish enough. And I was like, what does that mean? What does that mean, CK? Why are Bitcoiners not bullish enough? What has led you to that train of thought? What pattern have you been picking up?
No, definitely. Great question. So I've actually been kind of on this rant for a while, which is that if you make reasonable assumptions about what hyper Bitcoinization will look like into the future, and then you look at how Bitcoiners are kind of behaving now in terms of like the way that they talk about the value of Bitcoin and the way that they talk about other assets, it becomes really obvious to me that most Bitcoiners are not actually thinking about like hyper Bitcoinization. Like this idea of infinity divided by 21 million. Well, if you just make reasonable assumptions about infinity, how much value there is today, and then you divide it by sats, like you're looking at an insane, value buying power per sat number. Like, people are leveraging up. They're putting themselves in pretty risky positions in terms of like Bitcoin and fiat terms today. When in reality they just don't need to, because sats are going to buy so much in the future that obviously you want to have as much as you can, but you also want to get sats at today's value, at any value today, kind of across the finish line to hyper Bitcoinization. Any sats that you can get across the finish line are going to be a win. And personally, I just think that, there's going to be a lot of Bitcoiners out there right now that are taking too much risk. They're not taking into account how volatile it's going to be to get across from fiat cluster to a Bitcoin standard. And they're just like miscalculating this whole thing. So my whole take is that, one, Bitcoin is binary. It either works and it becomes a global monetary standard. It integrates into our energy infrastructure. It is the cleanest, easiest, most trust-free way in order to communicate, store, and utilize value, or it doesn't, and the incentives break down, and no one cares. Like, I hope you bought some guns, So like this kind of like middle ground where Bitcoin is another asset to choose from, and there's a lot of other assets. Like, I don't think that that's going to be the majority of Bitcoin's history. I think that in the next, I personally think it's going to happen in this decade. But within our lifetimes, it's either Bitcoin wins because of obvious utility, or and the game theory works out, or the incentives fall apart. So if Bitcoin wins, one, infinity divided by 21 million is insane amount. But on top of that, like we talk about all the time on Bitcoin podcast, how bad fiat money is like messing up the world, how it is causing governments to be able to allocate capital in ways that are inefficient, how it makes it difficult for people to do business. And in many ways, you can kind of see how operating on a fiat standard is kind of driving insanity, right? So if we have all this value on a fiat standard, don't you think that moving to like a rational Bitcoin standard is actually going to create more value, right? So infinity is getting bigger if Bitcoin works. So we're transitioning to a sound money standard that's going to create more growth, better resource allocation. It's going to help us store value longer and with more certainty. And on top of that, we're dividing it by very, very scarce 21 million Bitcoin. So, when we're talking about like $1 million Bitcoin, like that's a joke. It's honestly a joke. Like, we should be talking about, multiple dollars of buying power per Satoshi. Like, the fact that we're not talking about like what is the sub Satoshi denomination standards going to be, and we're not debating that, is like case in point that we're not bullish enough, because like we're having the wrong conversations here.